The question has come up from a number of teachers about what it is we teach. Do kids have to read the same book or do they not? And the answer is no. They should have freedom of choice and they should be able to select their own books. And yes, they need to have some books in common so that they can test their differing reactions to the same text. Kids need to read the same book, the same text occasionally, because otherwise they have no way of knowing where their response to that text stands. They have no way of testing their reading of a work against someone else's. So I think it's critically important that some of the works students read be works that they read in common. It's not to say they shouldn't select much of their reading on their own, because satisfying that personal inclination for a certain kind of text is vitally important in creating a love of reading.
We actually don't think that it has to be an argument. When I first started teaching 7th grade, Nancy Atwell's book In the Middle had just come out. And I grabbed it, read it, bought beanbag chairs and plants and thought, okay, now I've got it. And that didn't actually work. It took me a while to figure out that she was really talking about creating lifelong readers, and that she was spot on target with the idea that to become a lifelong reader, somewhere along that path, I've got to find the books that interest me so that I move into go back to Margaret Early again, I can't even tell you why I like what I'm reading. I just have got to turn the page after page after page. And I think Penny Kittle in her new book, Book Love, also talks very powerfully about the importance of choice. I don't think any of us would say choice in what I want to read isn't important. We think it's critical. But we also think that to become a more skilled reader, at times we probably all want to read the same thing so that we can have those conversations that let us see how someone else is making sense of something or how someone else is handling a particular portion of the text. And so what we would encourage you to think about is, why would you ever do anything one particular way? Either always have a classroom that's based on just literature circles, or always have a classroom that's based on every kid always reading his or her own novel, or always having a classroom where everyone's reading the very same thing, because that won't work either. So this is really to remind us, this section right here, must everyone read the same book, of some of the big things we need to think about when we're choosing how we might share a particular novel at any particular time. We noticed that when we were writing this part, we just went online and did some quick searches on book communities, and there were hundreds of thousands of references on Google to different types of communities that people are joining and their conversations they're having. And that said to us, people are really anxious to have that in common book experience. And so if you're thinking, well, gosh, no, we would never all read the same book at the same time, I worry that that means you're shortchanging students and their ability to be in a community in which we've all had the very same experience. Do you want to say anything else about that particular one?
No.
Okay. So that really led us to talking about the next question, which was, how do I judge the complexity of a text? If we're all going to read the same book, then don't I have some sort of need to know just how complex of a text this is, and how will I make it fit with all of my students? And we think that right now this is a perfect time to talk about this, as the Common Core is reminding us that we need to have students read more and more complex texts. And I want to say something, I just thought of something. There are several states, my state's one of them, Texas, that have not adopted the Common Core. And if you're in one of the states, Virginia's another, that hasn't, you might think, well, gosh, what do I need to know about this? I don't think that's the case at all. We in Texas are always thinking more about rigor. We're always thinking more about text complexity. We're dealing with these very same issues, but they may not be against the backdrop of the Common Core. So we're not trying to leave out states that haven't chose those. We just know that probably one of the benefits of the Common Core standards is it's given us a national language we can use in a lot of areas. So whether you're in a state that's adopted the Common Core or not, one of the things that we think is important to do as a classroom teacher is say, what kind of text do I have my kids reading at the beginning of the school year, in the middle of the school year, and at the end of the school year? And make sure that as they're moving across the year that they're reading increasingly more complex texts. One of the things that a report that came out several years ago, Reading Between the Lines, showed us is that kids in college who are struggling aren't struggling because they don't know how to make an inference, or they don't know how to make a causal connection, or they can't compare and contrast. They're struggling because they don't know how to do those things with complex texts. And so from that information, the people who worked on the research report stepped back and said, what's happening in schools that if we follow those kids forward, is creating kids that when they get to college know some of those critical skills but can't apply them to complex texts. And almost always those kids came from environments, school environments, in which the texts either stayed the same level of complexity all year long because the teacher was reacting to this concern of my kids can't read the book, so they kept giving them easy books so that they could get the content, or especially in high school the books were just kept on the shelf and they had almost become an oral culture classroom where the teacher was sharing all of the information and kids were just taking down notes, always done within that moment of the teacher saying the kid has got to have the information because we've got to pass the test, and the textbook looked too hard. Well, the reality was kids might have been able to pass the test, but they didn't learn how to handle complex texts. And so then they got into technical school or 2-year community college or 4-year college, and suddenly that English teacher wasn't around, because the professor was saying go off and read this stuff on your own, and sometimes it had nothing to do with what the professor would lecture about, and the kids didn't know how to manage it. So the Common Core, the architects of the Common Core stepped in and said one of the things we've got to make sure we do is as kids move within a school year and then across the school year, they move through more and more complex texts. So that's what we're talking about in this section. There have been other people who have really talked about it at much greater length. In particular, we're fans of the book by Nancy Frey, Diane Lapp, and Doug Fisher called Text Complexity. We would encourage you absolutely to look at that, as well as looking at this section. And we offer you over on pages, pages 60 and 61, the worksheet that we created in collaboration with teachers in Orange County and Akron, Orange County, Florida, and Akron, Ohio. Just sort of some prompts that you can think about when you're looking at those qualitative dimensions and the reader and task considerations. All of that, though, leads to the final big question.
Which is the ultimate question. Are we creating lifelong learners? That actually circles back to where we began, I think. Are we creating self-reliant, independent readers who will go out with an inclination to seek more information, to seek other perspectives, insights into the world, so that he can refine his own. She can reshape her understanding of who she is and where she fits in the world. If we create independent, self-reliant readers with the predisposition to learn and to think more clearly, more sharply about the world, then I think we will be creating lifelong learners. if we train kids to pass a test and be done with it, then we're going to be turning out kids represented by a student I had in class one year who heard with dismay that we were going to read Shakespeare again this year. And he said, "Oh, God, I had Shakespeare last year. I thought I was finished with him. I didn't think I'd ever have to face him again." There's a child who had the inoculation model of education. If I've had it, I don't need it again. I can be done with it. We don't want the child who says, "I don't ever have to read again because I know everything I need to know." We want the child to leave school thinking, "I need to know more, and I want to know more." And if we focus on getting kids engaged, if we focus on the transaction between the student and the text, and then between the student and another reader, if we can get them to love that process of coming to understand better, then we are more likely, it seems to me, to create lifelong learners, which is really what we need to do. We don't need to turn out of the 12th grade kids who have said, "I've been thinking for 12 years, I don't ever have to think again." We need kids come out of the 12th grade saying to themselves, "There's a great deal out there I am going to have to think about, decisions I'm going to have to make, and I will make them better if I read better, think better, talk better, write better."
Nor do we want what happened really while we were writing this very short section. I was talking with a neighbor's son who was in his first year of college at a wonderful 4-year institution, and I said, "What was the most surprising thing about college?" And he said, "The most surprising thing happened at my midterm exam of my chemistry, whatever level chemistry course he was taking." And I said, "What was that?" And he said, "The question on the exam was, now that you've read chapters 1 through such and such and been through the first half of this semester and participated in all of our conversations, what are the big questions yet to be discussed?" And he said, "I sat there and thought, I've never been asked that." He said, "In all my years of school, I was taught how to answer." And he said, it completely, he said, "I sat there for more than half the test thinking, what does he mean? What are the big questions?" He said, "They wanted me thinking in college in a way that I wished I had been thinking all through high school." And I'm sure, I'm positive that in that young man's high school career, at some point he had a teacher that said, "What are the big questions?" But what really stuck in his mind was that high school was about getting really good on tests, whether it was the AP test or the SAT test or our state test. It was about learning how to answer. And he said, college is about learning how to ask. Now, I want to push that down. We both want to push that down all throughout the kids' elementary, middle school, and high school, so that we're helping to create lifelong learners. We hope that you'll enjoy reading this section, and we'll spend a little bit of time looking at that final section of this question on page 63, talking with your colleagues about those big issues of creating a lifelong learner. I'm Kylene Beers.
And I'm Bob Probst.